A sunlit forest usually suggests peace and isolation, but just past the edge of this particular campsite, the quiet of the woods hid the discovery of a violent crime scene. Lying in the brush was a woman who had been stabbed at least 10 times. Her tongue was swollen and her body was covered in bruises that had already begun to tan shades of green and blue. Beside her lay a handgun, which was found to be empty. One of her shoes had been removed and was sitting nearby. This diagram shows the standard forensic markers investigators look for at a violent crime scene. Despite the clear signs of a struggle, the results for DNA, hair samples, and fingerprints all came back as 0. There were no biological traces left behind. The total absence of physical evidence suggests that the perpetrator took specific precautions to leave the site clean. While the physical evidence was successfully managed, the location itself presented a factor the attacker may not have accounted for. Just yards away, a tent sat in the darkness. Inside, 3 children were awake, hearing the events of the night as they happened. The previous day, an 11-year-old boy had arrived at this spot with his father and 3 brothers to set up their summer campsite. By late evening, the father and the youngest brother, Trevor, were asleep. The narrator and his 2 older brothers, Kyle and Ethan, remained awake by the fire. Kyle began telling scary stories, a common campfire pastime that heightened the group's anxiety as they sat in the dark. This schematic illustrates the process of cognitive priming. By focusing on frightening stories, the boys were inadvertently training their brains to be hyper-alert to any movement or sound in the dark woods. That heightened state was suddenly tested when they heard a distinct rustling in the bushes nearby. Kyle decided to investigate. As he walked toward the sound in the darkness, the rustling grew increasingly loud. He reached the bushes and pulled them open, only to find nothing there. The noise had stopped completely. Moments later, a woman's scream echoed from the distance. Kyle immediately ran back and scrambled into his tent. The screaming continued, but with each passing second, the sound moved closer to the campsite. Inside the tent, Ethan began to panic. Then, a heavy thud was heard just outside their shelter. The narrator followed Ethan into the tent, where the brothers huddled together in fear until morning. This waveform maps the sounds the boys heard from inside their tent. The rustling, the approaching screams, and the final thud create a chronological record that aligns with the location where the woman's body was later found. When the sun rose, the forest returned to its normal state, making the terrors of the night feel distant. The boys told their father about the screams and the sounds they had heard during the night. Their father dismissed the story, assuming they had simply let their imaginations run wild after telling ghost stories by the fire. The family spent the morning packing their gear. They were running late, frustrated by the mundane delays of a camping trip, unaware of what lay just beyond the perimeter. Before they could leave, Trevor went into the bushes. He suddenly came running back toward the car, screaming for his father. He told the family that he had found someone dead in the woods. The family followed him back to the site and discovered the victim, confirming that the screams heard the night before were not a product of their imagination. After investigating the scene, police noted the total absence of fingerprints or DNA. They concluded that the perpetrator had likely planned the encounter to ensure no physical evidence was left behind. It remains a chilling realization for the narrator. While they were telling ghost stories to frighten each other, a real-life killer was operating just a few yards away, leaving no trace behind but the sounds they couldn't ignore. We start with a baseline scenario many drivers have experienced. A 2-hour drive late at night. About 45 minutes into the trip, the driver hits a sudden physical wall of overpowering, uncontrollable fatigue. The environment offered absolutely zero safe harbor. We are looking at a pitch-black stretch of isolated asphalt, boxed in by claustrophobic walls of timber. Out of sheer physiological desperation to sleep, the driver pulls over. At exactly 11:22 p.m., the body simply overrides the brain's caution. This overhead map outlines the driver's attempt to stay hidden. The vehicle moves off the asphalt, putting the tree line between the car and the road. But this dark visual zone strips away potential help. Passing road traffic won't see a thing. Extreme physical exhaustion forces a dangerous negotiation. A driver will compromise basic physical security for the immediate relief of closing their eyes. Let's track how this threat develops. At 11:50 p.m., a brief scratching sound outside the car startles Teitur awake. Under normal circumstances, an unknown noise in a dark forest triggers alarm. But severe sleep deprivation heavily impairs the brain's baseline threat assessment. The driver easily dismisses the noise and immediately falls back asleep. This timeline graph tracks the sequence: the 11.22 stop, the brief 11.50 anomaly, and the critical escalation when scratching strikes again at 12:40 a.m. Calculating this 50-minute gap between noises shatters the driver's dismissal. Wild animals do not return an hour later. A glance in the rear-view mirror provides visual confirmation. The driver catches a fleeting glimpse of an unidentifiable figure retreating quickly into the pitch-black forest. That single visual cue immediately connects with an old cultural memory: the hook killer, the classic story of a couple parked in the woods, a scratched door, and a predator waiting for the driver to step outside. The driver doesn't wait for a closer look. Fear finally overrides the paralysis of sleep deprivation, jolting the driver into consciousness and sending the car accelerating away from the brush. In this state of exhaustion, the driver didn't need a perfect identification of the threat. They just needed a frame of reference. And the imagery of the urban legend provided a visceral, terrifying reason to stop thinking and start driving. This topographic map shows the escape route. The car flees the origin point, accelerating along a vector line measuring exactly 100 yards toward a sharp, blind curve. As the driver rounds that curve, an abandoned vehicle with an open door appears right on the shoulder. The driver taps the brakes, slowing down just long enough to peer inside the cabin and confirm that it is completely empty. Out of nowhere, a man sprints aggressively from around the blind corner, charging directly into the stark glare of the headlights toward the driver's window. The man starts screaming a hostile command. Hey, you, get the fuck out of your car. Now, the driver's nervous system hits a total overload. Instead of waiting to hear more, the driver slams on the gas and speeds off, abandoning the scene entirely. In high-stakes, rapidly escalating environments, uncertainty is dangerous. When you don't have the time or safety to gather more information, simply putting distance between yourself and the situation is the most effective way to eliminate the risk. We are left with the terrifying ambiguity of that screaming man in the road. Based on the facts, there are two diametrically opposed possibilities for his identity. First, there is the predator theory. The man was the figure lurking in the bushes, furious that his initial trap had failed, and attempting a desperate secondary ambush down the road. Then, there is the victim theory. The man was another stranded driver, whose car had just been hijacked by the entity in the woods, and he was frantically screaming a warning or begging for rescue. Both scenarios are plausible, but discovering the true motive behind the screaming man is entirely irrelevant in the context of acute split-second survival. Pausing to determine if a screaming stranger is a murderer or a victim costs you your only window to escape. Isolated environments breed unpredictable dangers. When you pull to the edge of a dark map and face unexplainable escalation, your best defense is to simply trust your immediate instinct to run.